Good morning, everyone. I am Teacher Jarrett, and today we are going to be talking about folk tales. We are going to be reading a folk tale together, okay? The name of the folk tale we will read today is called The Storytelling Stone. Now, storytelling means to share stories or to tell stories. So this folk tale is about a stone or a rock that can tell stories. Wow, is that incredible? Yeah. So the story is retold by Amy Helfer, and it's illustrated by Diane Patterson. Okay? At the end of this story, we will also have a paired read that is poetry and song. Okay, let's go to the next page. This is the table of contents. So let's see what we will be reading about today. Genre folktale. Essential question. What is a folktale? And we've been talking about that all week, right? It's a story that's usually old and it's usually fiction, right? And it tries to teach us a lesson. So let's be thinking about what lesson we are going to learn from this story today, this folktale today, okay? Okay, so The Storytelling Stone, retold by Amy Helfer, illustrated by Diane Patterson. Chapter 1, Grandfather Stone. Chapter 2, Crow Hears the Stories. Chapter 3, Crow Tells the Stories. Then we have Respond to Reading. Then we have a paired read, poetry and song, about family stories. And then we have our focus on genre. Okay, let's go to the story now. Chapter 1, Grandfather Stone. Once upon a time, a boy lived at the edge of a village. His name was Crow. Crow had no one to take care of him. His clothes were shabby and his face was dirty. So here are two children in the village, and they are looking at Crow. We can see their clothes look nice, right? They have jewelry and it looks nice. Crow doesn't have shoes and he doesn't have jewelry and his clothes are all ripped. See that? So let's keep reading. Crow didn't have any time for playing. He was busy taking care of himself. He had to clean his hut, he had to get his own food, and he had to cook it. So that means he didn't have a mother or father. He had to do everything himself. Wow. That's a very hard life. So he doesn't have time to get nice clothes, and he doesn't have enough money to buy nice jewelry. He just has to work hard to survive. So let's go to the next page. Crow hunted in the woods every day. He traded his catch for corn and beans. One day, Crow sat down to rest. He leaned against a large stone. He was nearly asleep when he heard a voice. So we can see here's Crow. He was out hunting. He has a bow and arrow, right? And so this is the birds or the food that he caught. And here's the stone he's taking a nap on. He's falling asleep. May I tell you a story? The voice asked. Crow jumped up and looked around. He didn't see anyone. Who's there? He asked. Show yourself. It's me, Grandfather Stone, said the voice. Crow noticed a face take shape in the large stone. "I won't hurt you," said the stone. "I just want to tell you a story." And look, we can see the eyes and the mouth and the nose. It's like a face in the stone. He's going to tell Crow some stories now. Chapter 2. Crow hears the stories. "What is a story?" Crow asked. Grandfather Stone told him, "Stories tell about everything that happened before now." Crow sat down. Grandfather Stone began to tell Crow about a time long before this one, so a long time ago. First, he told him a story about how birds got wings. Next, he told how fish learned to swim. And there's a bird flying and a fish swimming. Hours later, Grandfather Stone was tired. "Go home," he told Crow. "Come back tomorrow and I will tell you more." Crow went back to his village. He traded his birds for a hot supper. Then he went to sleep. Day after day, Crow listened to stories. Finally, Grandfather Stone said, "That is all I know. Now you know it too. Pass on all my stories so they will never be forgotten." And we can see he was telling stories about corn and turtles. So after Grandfather Stone finished telling Crow all of the stories, Crow went to tell the stories. Chapter 3. Crow tells the stories. Crow went back home and packed up his things. The next day, he left his village. After walking many miles, Crow reached another village. He told the people all the stories about the corn and how fish learn to swim, and birds and turtles, and many, many more. The people were happy to hear the stories. They gave Crow many gifts, like food or jewelry or nicer clothes. They were so happy to hear stories that Crow was telling. Crow walked from village to village, telling his stories. After many years, he returned home. Now he was a grown man. The people in his own village didn't know who he was. They invited Crow to sit by the fire, and they shared their food with him. Afterwards, Crow began to tell his stories. So now Crow looks older, and he's wearing nice clothes, and he's talking to all of the people in his village. When he was finished, Crow said, "Tell these stories to your children and grandchildren. Now that you know the stories of our people, you must never forget them." This is how stories began. This is why there are storytellers today. Whenever you hear stories about your people, listen and pass them on. So Crow learned all of these stories from Grandfather Stone, and he traveled around and shared the stories with everyone. And at the end, he came back to his own people and shared the stories with old people and younger people and babies and children. And all of these people will continue to tell the stories so that the stories will never be forgotten. Okay? So, what is the lesson that we learned today from this story? Well, the lesson we learned is that make sure you pay attention to your people and your culture. And when you hear stories about your people or your culture, make sure that you share those stories with other people, young people and old people, so that the stories are never forgotten. Okay? Okay. Now let's go to the respond to reading. Yay! Okay. So I will make the chart and we can start thinking about some of our cause and effect relationships. Okay. So this story has some cause and effect in it. So we are going to talk about that. Okay. So first of all, let's think about the first thing that happened in the story. So we know that he was poor, right? And we knew that he had to do a lot of work. But the first cause and effect really comes from when he laid down on the stone, right? Yeah, he laid down on the stone. And then, because he laid down on the stone, Grandfather Stone started talking to him and telling him stories, right? Yeah. So our first cause is Crow went out and laid down on Grandfather Stone. Okay. So let's make that bigger. Okay. So our first cause is he went out and laid down on Grandfather Stone, and the effect is that Grandfather Stone started telling Crow stories, right? Okay. So now let's go to our next cause and effect. So after Crow learned all of the stories, he did what? He went out and he told the stories to other people, right? Yeah. So Crow heard the stories from Grandfather Stone, right? And after he heard the stories, he went to tell other people about the stories, right? So Crow went out to other villages and told people his stories, right? And so what happened after he was telling all of these people his stories? So let's talk about that. So when Crow, another cause is Crow told people the stories, and as a result, or as an effect, the people gave him lots of gifts, right? So the people gave Crow many gifts, and Crow started to have a better life, right? So because Crow told these stories, all of the people gave him gifts, right? And so what happened at the very end? Let's think about what happened at the very end. So at the very end, Crow returned to his village, right? Crow returned to his village and told his people the stories, right? So at the very end, after he had a better life, Crow went back to his village and told his own people the stories, right? And so after he did that, what happened? Yes, all of the people in his village liked him and shared his stories too, right? So we can see that after Crow returned to his village and told his people the stories, all of the people in his village liked him and shared his stories too. So at the very beginning of the story, Crow was poor and had no money and people laughed at him. But after he knew some stories, people wanted to give him gifts and listen to him, right? And then his own villager people from his village wanted to listen to him too, right? So he became a very important person in his village. So now we are going to answer some questions. Okay? So let's erase this over here. You can practice some more if you want by going back in the video. And let's answer some of these questions. Okay. So our first question is, look at pages 2 and 3. Why didn't Crow have time to play? So let's look at pages 2 and 3. So here's 2. We see the children laughing at him. And here's 3. We see he has to work and find his own food, and he has to cook it. So why didn't Crow have time to play? If you know, raise your hand. Oh, I want you to tell me. Yes, Crow didn't have time to play because he had to spend all of his time doing work. Crow didn't have time to play because he had to spend all of his time working and cleaning so he could survive, right? Because if he had no food, if he didn't go hunting, then he had no food and then he'd be hungry. And then he would be tired and maybe he couldn't survive. So he had to hunt and clean before he had any time to play. And hunting and cleaning made him so busy that he didn't have any time to play, right? Yeah. Okay, that's a hard life. Let's go to the next story, next question. Look at page 10. Why didn't the people know who Crow was? Okay, so look at page 10. Why didn't the people know who Crow was? Okay, so let's go up and see. They didn't know who he was because he was a grown man. So he changed a lot, right? They didn't know who he was because he was a grown man, changed a lot, right? Here he looks clean and he looks like an older man, right? Yeah. So let's go to our next question. What does this folktale teach readers? We kind of talked about this question already, right? What does this folktale teach readers? So do you remember what we said? If you remember, you can raise your hand and you can tell me. If you know, oh, I want you to tell me. I'm listening. Very good. This folk tale teaches us to listen to stories about our culture and tradition, to share those stories with other people, right? So you can talk to other people about the food you like to eat, or you can talk to other people about the games you like to play. Like for me, when I was little, the computer I used was this big. And the cell phone I used, most cell phones today are small, right? But the cell phone that my parents had didn't have any games, and it was this big of a cell phone. And you had to carry it in a bag. So those are some stories that I can share with you, right? Now you can share some of your stories with your mother and your father, or your friends, or your grandmother or your grandfather, right? You can talk about the food you like to eat or the games you like to play. Okay, let's go to the next page. Okay, genre, poetry, song. Compare texts. Read a song about family stories. Family Stories by Amy Helfer. Amy Helfer is the same person who retold the folktale we just read, right? Yeah. So let's sing this song. When Dad was the same age as me, he used to sit on Grandpa's knee. Grandpa told what he enjoyed when he was just a little boy. Stories about the games he played, the names of all the friends he made, the places that he walked to, and the people that he talked to. Now I sit near my father's knee, and he tells those tales to me. He tells me his own stories too, about the things he used to do. One day, when I'm fully grown, I may have children of my own, and like my father used to do, I'll tell them all my stories too. Okay, so we talked about this just now, right? So you can talk to your mother or your father or your grandfather and listen to the stories that they have to tell, right? Maybe they'll tell you about the food they ate or the games they played when they were a child, or maybe the friends that they had, right? And then you can listen to those stories. And then if you have children someday, you can share those stories with your children, right? Yeah, very good. So now make connections. What stories have your parents or grandparents told you about when they were young? So this is something that you can do by yourself, okay? You can talk to your mother and father and listen what they have to say. For example, my mother and my father told me when they were young, they drove really big cars, right? And they told me about when they were growing up, their house was in a cornfield. They didn't have any neighbors. And now they live in the city of Chicago. So they live in the big city. And so originally their house was all alone in a cornfield. but now more and more buildings are getting built, and they feel like they're in a big city. So those are some stories maybe your parents or grandparents can share with you. You just have to ask. Okay, let's go to the next page. Focus on genre. Folktale. A folktale is a story based on traditions and customs. Folktales have been passed along through the years by telling them aloud. Folktales often teach lessons. What to look for. In The Storytelling Stone, a stone tells Crow how everything happened before now. In real life, stones do not speak. So that's how we know it's a folktale, right? So we know that a folktale is usually not true, but it is used to teach us lessons. Like the lesson we learned today, where you should share your stories and learn from your parents and your grandparents. So now it's your turn. Write a folktale that explains why something in nature is the way it is. Draw a picture to go with your story. Share your folktale and drawing with the class, or your friends, or your mother, or your father. So for example, you could say the sun was created because there was a person who knew how to fly, and the earth was very cold. So he wanted to make a place in the sky for people on earth to stay warm. So he took a big ball of fire and he flew up into the sky and he put it up in the sky. And that's how we have the sun. So that's not a true story, right? That's fiction. But it teaches us a lesson that we should also think about other people and people that are in the future. So that's why we recycle, and that's why in the folktale, the person wanted people on Earth to be warm, and he wanted future people to be warm, and so he made the sun, right? So now you can think about it and make some of your own stories up. Now let's go to our last page for today. Yay! We are going to answer a few questions and then we will be done. Okay, so our first question is, how did the people in Crow's village change from the beginning to the end of the story? Okay, so how did they change? So we know that the people at the beginning of the story, the people laughed at Crow and thought he was so poor and dirty, right? But at the end of the story, all of the people wanted to talk to Crow and hear his stories. They thought he was so smart, right? Yeah. All right, let's go to our next question. Okay, so our next question is, use the words someone wanted, but, so, and then to help you summarize the story. Okay. So we can say someone named Crow wanted to be happy, but he was poor and had no one to take care of him. So he listened to Grandfather Stone and then he told the stories to other people and they liked him, right? Okay. So let's make this a little bigger. Okay. So someone named Crow wanted to be happy, but he was poor and had no one to take care of him. So he listened to Grandfather Stone, and then he told the stories to other people, and they liked him. And now our last question is, what happened first, next, then, and finally? So I won't type this, but we will talk about it, okay? So first, Crow was poor and had no one to take care of him, so he had to take care of himself, right? Next, Crow went and laid on a stone, and Grandfather Stone told him stories. Then, Crow told the stories to lots of people in many different villages. Finally, Crow came back to his own village and told the people his stories, and they liked him because he could make them happy and tell stories, and he was no longer poor anymore, right? Yeah, okay. So that is all of our lesson for today. So we learned a lot about folk tales this week. And now when you go in the future to your grandmother's house or grandfather's house, make sure you listen to a story. Ask them to tell you stories so that you can know more about them and what happened in the past. And you can tell those stories to your children too someday, maybe. Okay? So that is all I have for today. It's time for me to say bye-bye. Okay? And I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.